How did gymnastics go from a war ritual to a sport in modern Olympics? From the fierce rivalries to the stunning flips that defy gravity, gymnastics has seen it all. But do you know the stories behind the legends who changed the game forever?
Faultless. Absolutely faultless.
Like many sports today, gymnastics traces its history to athletic activities, unlike their modern counterparts. However, its origin isn't limited to ancient Greece alone. Some historic accounts believe other civilizations also practiced gymnastics, like in ancient Egypt, where hieroglyphs and frescoes as far back as 5000 BCE show women performing acrobatics for the entertainment of pharaohs. There is more evidence from Far East Asia. In China, for example, stone gravings from the Han period, 206 BCE to 220 CE, show a predecessor of gymnastics known as Jiu-Jitsu, which involved elements of dance, wrestling, and tumbling. But it was the ancient Greeks that popularized the sport. For them, gymnastics was fairly straightforward. It comes from the Greek word gymnasian, which means to exercise naked. So gymnastics was used to describe every physical activity that happened in the gymnasium. Male athletes, who were the typical gymnasts at the time, did in fact exercise naked. In Grecian history, gymnastics involved several physical activities such as swimming, running, weightlifting, and tumbling floor exercises. Another interesting fact about gymnastics during this period is that it meant different things to different Greek states. For example, in Athens, gymnastics was meant to improve athletes both physically and mentally because Athenians believed that the mind could not be healthy if the body was sick. Or on the other hand, the war-hungry Spartans largely used gymnastics as training for war. But all that changed when the Romans came to town and conquered Greece. The Romans turned gymnastics into a formal sport. Although they appreciated its martial value, they used it as a preparatory process for Roman soldiers compared to the war or mental and physical training that is meant to its Greek originators. When it wasn't used for militaristic purposes, the Romans considered it a form of entertainment. However, with them in charge, gymnastics fell and entered the Dark Ages. Similar to gymnastics, the Olympic Games were a Greek tradition. In the 6th century BCE, the first ever Olympic Games were held in Greece. However, following the fall of Greece to the Roman Empire, gymnastics became a training protocol, and the Olympic Games became less and less popular due to their pagan associations. The Christian Romans eventually abolished the game in 400 CE. Ultimately, the Roman Empire fell too. You'd think that this would see a surge in ancient Greek traditions again, but the world was a much different place at the time, so gymnastics fell into obscurity, much like the Olympic Games. But that's the beauty of ideas, you see. It doesn't matter how long they fly under the radar, they are almost immortal. Fast forward to the 19th century during the Enlightenment period, and both gymnastics and the Olympics started to make a comeback. While the modern Olympics started much later in 1986, modern gymnastics started earlier, but things weren't always smooth sailing. For one, coming into the Enlightenment period, Europeans did not like physical activity because of early Christian sentiments. It was also a very expensive activity, and tastes changed a lot. For instance, the typical gymnasts at the time were mostly traveling troupes of thespians and circuses from the medieval period. However, all of that started to change in the late 18th century when a certain bearded German man, Johann Christoph Friedrich Gutsmuth, created a guide for gymnastics in 1793. Gutsmuth, who was soon named the grandfather of modern gymnastics, split the sport into two forms, natural and artistic gymnastics. Even though the bearded German brought attention back to gymnastics, he didn't make it as popular again. This was done by a Prussian ex-soldier, Friedrich Ludwig John, who then got the fitting title of Father of Modern Gymnastics. But John wouldn't have made gymnastics great again had it not been for a certain shorty in a blue coat and a sideways hat. After Napoleon took Prussia to the cleaners, John thought gymnastics was a good way to raise the spirits of the people and bring them together again. So gymnastics became a nation-building activity. John introduced the Spartan style of gymnastics in Prussia. His militaristic approach would later inspire a youth movement led by a certain famous Austrian painter the following century. In 1811, John launched the first open-air gymnasium, the Turnplatz in Berlin. The popularity of gymnastics spread like wildfire after this, attracting young middle-class students from all over the country. This crop of gymnasts was known as the Turnverein movement, or Turners for short. But not everyone welcomed the rise in popularity. With Prussia under Napoleon's rule, John's efforts to unite Germans through gymnastics were seen as resistance against French influence. This created a period of tension, especially after Napoleon was sent packing in 1815. So in 1819, when a gymnast killed German playwright August von Kotzebue, the then King of Prussia, Frederick William III, banned the sport, and John was thrown into house arrest. Other Germanic states followed suit. It took over 20 years in 1842 before Frederick William IV lifted the ban. But by this point, John had already been banished from Berlin and forced to settle in a place without a gymnasium or higher learning institution. 3 of his close followers, Carl Beck, Carl Fallen, and Franz Lieber, migrated to North America to avoid arrest. As Prussia started to practice gymnastics again, the sport spread to nearby Prague, where a new gymnastics movement formed around the sport in the 1960s. This new movement was called Sokol. Other similar movements also started to show up around Europe at the time, like the Turners. The Sokol movement soon became a problem in Prague after Charlie Chaplin-looking Austrian painter conquered the area during World War II. So it was banned and stayed that way until 1946. However, Prague became a communist state and the ideals of the Sokol movement were still a no-no. So it was banned again in 1948. While Europe grappled with all these challenges, immigrants brought gymnastics to the United States in the 19th century. Among them were John's associates who re-established the Turners movement in their new homeland. But the true pioneer of American gymnastics was Dudley Allen Sargent, an educator and doctor. He taught the sport in American universities between the 1860s and 1910s and also created over 30 different apparatuses for the sport, some of which are still used today. Even though the dark ages of modern gymnastics came with many hurdles, no pun intended, it led to one of the most monumental events in history. In 1860, the first organized gymnastic festival was held in Coburg. It was called Turnfest because it was hosted in Germany by the Turners. The festival drew many clubs associated with the Turners and was the first international competition in the sport. The more it grew in popularity, the more it attracted gymnasts from outside of Germany. It took until 1861 before the second Turnfest event was hosted again, this time in Berlin. Fast forward to 1896, gymnastics outgrew the Turnfest and became an Olympic event. Finally, the Olympics and gymnastics were united again. Between 1861 and 1896, 8 more Turnfest events had been held in Germany, each one pulling an even larger crowd than the former. Also, during the period in 1881, the Bureau of the European Gymnastics Federation was created. The Bureau is now known as the International Gymnastics Federation, FIG, today, and is now the global governing body for gymnastics. So 15 centuries later, after surviving obscurity and spreading across the globe, both gymnastics and the Olympics returned home to Greece. But did you know that gymnastics made its debut at the very first modern Olympics, and that it was a male-only affair? In 1896, the world witnessed the birth of the modern Olympic Games in Athens, Greece. Gymnastics was front and center, drawing huge crowds inspired by the legendary Turnfests. All these decades of practice made Germany a formidable opponent at the first Olympics. They dominated the sport, going home with 5 gold, 3 silver, and 2 bronze medals. But amidst the glory, there was a glaring omission. Women were completely absent from these games. The first Olympic Games and gymnastics event in modern history was a male fest. It wasn't until 1906 that female gymnasts were allowed to perform demonstration exercises at the Olympics. Yet it would take another 22 years before they could officially compete, starting with the 1928 Olympics. Even then, their participation was limited to rope climbing, balance beam, and team competitions. You might be surprised to learn that early Olympic gymnastics included a wide array of events, far more than today. Inspired by the ancient Greeks, it featured track and field events, rope climbing, vaulting, parallel bars, log jumping, and the horizontal bar. As the 20th century unfolded, gymnastics saw a surge in popularity across Europe, then a dip in the mid-1900s before another explosive resurgence during the Cold War. Nothing like war and strife to make gymnastics cool again. The Olympics became a battleground, with nations on both sides of the Iron Curtain vying for supremacy through the power and grace of their gymnasts. But wait, it gets worse. The late 1900s was an important period for gymnastics and the Olympics. By 1960, the fourth Olympic Games was held in Rome, which introduced the world to the modern format of gymnastics, with events for both men and women. Some 12 years later, in 1972, the Olympic Games came to Germany. What should have been a stage for proving athletic excellence turned into a political propaganda machine under the influence of our infamous Austrian painter. The 1972 Olympics in Munich, otherwise known as the Games of the XI or 11th Olympiad, was unlike any other Olympic event that had been held before. The world was on the brink of another major war, and Hitler saw the Games as an opportunity to show the world the unmatched ability and superiority of the Aryan race. Hitler's regime did not hold back, splashing huge on new, grand stadiums, medals, and putting out elaborate ceremonies. Political tensions could not have been higher as the world watched Hitler and his Nazi regime turn the Olympics into a massive propaganda machine. It was the first case of sports washing, and Hitler was the inventor. At the start, it looked like the failed Austrian painter was onto something as German athletes bossed the competition, particularly gymnastics. It was medal after medal from the highest gold to the lowest bronze. The biggest performers for Germany were Konrad Frey and Alfred Schwartzmann, who left the field with multiple individual medals. However, the Aryan superiority came crashing down when African-American track and field star Jesse Owens rocked up to the field. Owens didn't just give the Germans a run for their money, he bossed just about every event he entered, leaving with 4 gold medals. Cue a disappointed Hitler watching his propaganda machine blow up in his face. But Owens' victories weren't a coincidence, you see. They were a long time coming. Since modern gymnastics restarted in Europe, European athletes have dominated gymnastics at the Olympics. At this point, the Olympics had been held 2 more times after the inaugural event in Athens. The second time was in Amsterdam in 1928, while the third was in Melbourne in 1956. With Europeans coming out on top in all 3 Olympics so far, the United States set out to do something about it. This led to the creation of the United States Gymnastics Federation in 1963. Boy, did this pay off. Enter Kathy Rigby, a trailblazer who bagged the United States its first international gymnastics title at the 1970 World Championships in Yugoslavia. Although winning silver on the balance beam brought Rigby some fame, she became even more popular as a theater star, playing Peter Pan on stage and screen. Fast forward to the Munich Games in 1972, and Owens wasn't the only one to stun the world. Soviet gymnast Olga Korbut, despite being 17 at the time, stunned the world into silence when she performed the first ever backward somersault on the beam. Her backflip on uneven bars earned her a 9.8 score, which was insane at the time. The move was eventually credited to her and is now known as the Korbut flip. But what was so special about this flip that earned her such honors? Picture this. The move is so dangerous that it's been banned from the Olympics. Fast forward to 1976, and the Olympic Games came to North America. The 1976 Summer Olympics in Montreal produced yet another superstar, this time Nadia Comaneci from Romania. The 14-year-old showed remarkable skills to beat the insane score of Olga Korbut from 4 years earlier. Comaneci achieved a perfect 10 score in the uneven bars, becoming the first ever to pull such a feat in Olympic gymnastics history. She came into the event as another teen gymnast but left as a legend. Besides Owens at the Munich Games, European dominance continued in gymnastics, and this was starting to get to many competitive nations, especially in the West and Asia. But what could they do about it? Well, the United States and China went over and beyond to improve their gymnastics programs. So when the Olympics returned to North America again, this time in 1984 in Los Angeles, the United States was more than prepared. But the event didn't come without drama. For starters, the Soviet team boycotted the Los Angeles Olympics. Not that anyone complained, though. That was one less European superpower to worry about. The U.S. was off to a great start, too, with its men's gymnastics team winning its first ever gold medal. However, the true star of the show was another teenager. Mary Lou Retton from West Virginia. Only 16 at the time, Retton made history by winning the individual all-around title. This made her the first American athlete to win an individual Olympic medal. But America wasn't quite done yet. Fast forward to the next Olympic Games, which was held in the United States again, this time in Atlanta in 1996. That year, the United States produced the Magnificent Seven, an iconic group of women who won the U.S. its first women's all-around title. Within this group of stars, there was one who stood far above the rest, Carrie Strug. It was Strug who won the first gold medal for the U.S. team, and oh, did she do it in style. Despite injuring her ankle, Strug performed an insane vault that left everyone with their jaws on the floor. Then came Dominique Dawes, who became the first African-American woman to win an individual Olympic medal in gymnastics. The 1996 team was so successful and famous that they immortalized Title IX, which was introduced at the Munich Games in 1972. Their victory made public school sports more accessible to female athletes and opened the doors for many more female athletes in the United States and beyond. The Olympics made another stop in Sydney, Australia in 2000, where trampoline gymnastics were introduced. The next stop was where it all started, in Athens in 2004. The United States maintained its competitive edge with Carly Patterson breaking a new record. The 16-year-old became the first American woman to win the individual all-around gold in an Olympic event not boycotted by anyone. Paul Hamm kept the winning streak going for the United States, winning the men's all-around gold. 4 years later, the Olympics went to the next big competitor, rivaling the United States to take the crown from the Europeans, China. Held in Beijing in 2008, China dominated the trampoline gymnastics events through He Wenna and Lu Chunlong, who won the women's and men's trampoline events, respectively. For America, Shawn Johnson and Nastia Liukin dominated women's gymnastics and kept the U.S. in the fight. The Europeans weren't backing down either, with Russia providing fierce competition in rhythmic gymnastics, winning gold in both individual and group all-around events. In 2012, the Olympics returned to Europe, this time in London. America was at the fore once again, with Gabby Douglas becoming the first African-American to win the individual all-around gold. But that was only the tip of the iceberg, because the United States produced another miracle team since the Magnificent Seven of Atlanta '96, Eagle Express. The 2012 team, dubbed the Fierce Five, won the gold in the women's team event. The United States became an unmistakable dominant force in Olympic gymnastics from this moment forward. Between the 2016 and 2021 Olympics in Brazil and Tokyo, respectively, America produced another famous gymnast and gymnastics team. Enter Simone Biles, who left Rio de Janeiro with 4 gold medals and 1 bronze medal, breaking the record as the most decorated gymnast in a single Olympics. The U.S. women's team, the Final Five, followed suit, bagging gold at the 2016 Olympics. There was much anticipation for Biles' return for the 2021 Olympics in Tokyo. However, she withdrew from the event for health reasons, but not before claiming bronze in the balance beam. Sunisa Lee kept the ball rolling, becoming the first Asian American to win the women's all-around gold. The 2021 Olympics also marked the end of Russia's dominance in the group all-around event as Bulgaria usurped the title, winning gold. The Russians were pushed back even further when Linoy Ashram of Israel won the individual all-around in rhythmic gymnastics, breaking its long-running gold streak. With the fierce competition in gymnastics at every Olympic event for decades now, we can rest easy knowing that the 2024 Olympics in France will bring us yet more memorable moments and new legends. And as this video ends, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to get premium content.